Betty Davis said I supped with every male star at MGM, except Lassie. She said the best time she ever had with me was when she pushed me down the stairs in Baby Jane. She said I was a movie star and she was an actress, as if those words meant the same thing in a system that was throwing us both in the trash the moment we turned 50. My name is Joan Crawford, and while Betty Davis was busy making speeches, I was busy making moves. Here's what 40 years of war actually look like. In 1962, Betty Davis was performing Tennessee Williams on Broadway when I walked into her dressing room after the show. I handed her a novel with a note written in large letters. Love to Betty, Joan Crawford. The book was called Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Davis read it. She said yes, and the last battle of a war that had been running since 1933 moved into a decaying Hollywood mansion where I planned to finish what she started. I am Joan Crawford. I was born Lucille Fay LeSueur in San Antonio, Texas in 1904, and I renamed myself, or rather, a magazine contest renamed me, and I spent 50 years maintaining that name against every force Hollywood deployed against it, including Betty Davis, including my own daughter, including the men who built this industry, and the men who decided when women like us were finished. Davis had the sharpest tongue in Hollywood. I had the coldest strategy. Between the two of us, we produced one of the greatest films ever made and one of the longest wars ever fought in this industry. This is my account of it, in my words, with the names intact, starting with the day she lost Franchot Tone and decided I was the reason. The war didn't begin with Franchot Tone. It began with the divorce announcement and a front page, and the day Joan Crawford accidentally destroyed Betty Davis's career launch without even trying. In 1933, Warner Brothers had planned an extensive publicity campaign for X-Lady, Davis's first major starring vehicle. Billboards, interviews, a full studio push to launch a new star. And then I, who was at MGM, had nothing to do with the film and barely knew Davis, announced my divorce from Douglas Fairbanks Jr. The scandal went to every front page in the country. X-Lady disappeared from coverage before it even opened. Davis never forgot it. She said later that I had a particular talent for appearing at exactly the wrong moment, or, depending on your perspective, exactly the right one. Then came 1935. Then came Franchot Tone. Davis was filming Dangerous with him and fell hard. She said publicly in 1987, 52 years later, I fell in love with Franchot, professionally and privately. Everything about him reflected his elegance, from his name to his manners. I already had my eyes on Tone. I invited him to my house and met him in my solarium. Davis watched Tone return to the set every day at lunch with his face covered in lipstick. She watched him choose me. Our engagement was announced while Dangerous was still filming. Davis said, "She took him from me coldly, deliberately, and with complete ruthlessness. I have never forgiven her for that, and I never will." I said, and this was published, that Tone thought Betty was a good actress, but he never thought of her as a woman. There is no shade more precise than that. I knew exactly what I was doing when I said it. In 1936, Davis won the Oscar for Dangerous, the film she made while watching me take her leading man. Franchot Tone went to her backstage to congratulate her. I was sitting next to him. I turned to Davis and said, "For the record, dear Betty, what a lovely frock." Franchot told me later I was being rude. I told him I was being accurate. That same year, Davis received her Oscar. She wore a simple navy dress to the ceremony, deliberately, she said, as a protest. I wore exactly what you would expect Joan Crawford to wear. The columnists noted the difference. The columnists always noted the difference. That was the point. Joan Crawford was MGM. Bette Davis was Warner Brothers. In the 1930s and 1940s, those were two different countries with two different languages and two very different ideas about what a woman on screen was supposed to be. MGM meant glamour. Louis B. Mayer's factory, where every detail of a star's public image was controlled, polished, and maintained with industrial precision. I had come up through chorus lines and burlesque and done what was necessary to get to the top, and Mayer rewarded the result. Davis looked at what I had and called it product. She wasn't entirely wrong. She was entirely wrong about what product meant in an industry that would have discarded both of us without a moment's hesitation the second we became inconvenient. Warner Brothers meant something different. Gritty dramas, difficult material, an actress who sued the studio to get out of her contract in the late 1930s because she wanted better roles and was prepared to take the fight to court. Davis fought the studio system on principle. I navigated it on strategy. Both approaches worked until they didn't. In 1943, I left MGM. Mayer told me my career was finished, in those words, in his office. I signed with Warner Brothers, Davis's studio. I asked for a dressing room across the hall from Davis. I sent her flowers. I sent gifts. I sent notes. I was trying to build a truce on her territory, on her terms. Davis returned everything. Every flower, every gift, every note, without response. Each return delivery was a declaration. Fine, no truce. War continued. Then Mildred Pierce arrived. The script came to Davis first. A working woman, sacrificed by the system, destroyed by her own child. Davis read it and passed. She found it beneath her. I read the same script, accepted, and won the Academy Award for Best Actress in 1946. Davis was not nominated that year. I accepted the Oscar from my bed in a silk negligee with photographers my publicist had pre-positioned in the room. Davis said for years the illness was strategic. The performance was real, and the negligee was real, and the Oscar was real, and Davis wasn't in any of the photographs. Davis had a gift for the memorable phrase that I never possessed and never pretended to. Joan Crawford is a movie star, she said. I am an actress. She said it as a distinction, as a hierarchy, as the settlement of a question she had decided didn't require further debate. What she didn't say, what she never said publicly, was that she had turned down Mildred Pierce. That the role she dismissed as beneath her was the role that gave me the Oscar she spent 40 years using as evidence that I was less than her. That detail was not in her speeches. It was in the studio files. I knew where the studio files were. By 1961, we were both in our 50s and both considered finished. Davis placed an actual advertisement in Variety that read, 30 years experience as an actress in motion pictures. Mobile still and more affable than rumor would have it. Wants steady employment in Hollywood. I read that advertisement. I understood it completely. The industry that had made us both extraordinary was treating us as problems to be managed out. I found Henry Farrell's novel. Two aging sisters, one a former child star, one a former film actress, trapped together in a decaying Hollywood mansion, destroying each other by inches. I read it and knew immediately. This was the only film either of us was going to make that mattered. I brought it to director Robert Aldrich. I told him Davis should play Baby Jane. Then I went to Broadway, waited until Davis had finished her curtain call for The Night of the Iguana, walked backstage, and handed her the book with a note in my largest handwriting. Love to Bette, Joan Crawford. It was the last love either of us expressed toward the other. Davis asked Aldrich only 2 questions when he approached her. First, would she be playing Jane? Second, was Aldrich sleeping with me? He confirmed on both points and she signed. Salary negotiations were conducted like a military campaign. Davis secured $60,000 against my $40,000, but less percentage of the profits. I negotiated hard and signed for $30,000 and 15% of net profits. When the film grossed $9 million on a $1 million budget, my percentage made me considerably more money than Davis's flat fee. She had the bigger salary. I had the better deal. Davis had top billing and consultation rights. I learned about the consultation rights and used them as motivation for every decision I made on that set. Davis had one more question for Aldrich before she confirmed. She wanted to know the precise dimensions of her dressing room relative to mine. She wanted hers to be larger. Aldrich confirmed it would be. Davis signed. That is the specific texture of how this war was conducted, in dressing room measurements and contract percentages and the precise placement of names above the title. And we hadn't even started filming yet. Robert Aldrich's daughter Adele worked on the Baby Jane set as script supervisor. She said, "They had baggage coming into this, and they were both in their 50s and considered has-beens. It was a very tense set." She also confirmed, at noon, the drinking would start. That was me. Davis sat with the crew, was informal, sociable, acted at full intensity even in rehearsals. I stayed in my dressing room and gave nothing until the camera turned. 2 completely different methods of working, both used as weapons. Davis was constantly criticizing how I looked on set. She told Aldrich I was trying to be too glamorous for a woman playing a prisoner in a wheelchair. She was right, and I didn't care. I was not going to appear on screen looking destroyed, while Davis appeared looking intense and committed. We were conducting the same image war on set that we had been conducting in the press for 30 years. The kick happened during a scene where Baby Jane, Davis, had to kick Blanche, me, in the head. Davis said afterward she barely touched me. I went to the doctor and needed stitches. Davis maintained for years that she barely touched me. Aldrich didn't comment on whose version was accurate. The production continued. I said nothing publicly. But there was a scene coming. Baby Jane had to drag Blanche across the floor, a long, physically demanding scene requiring multiple takes. Davis had a documented history of back problems. Before filming that scene, I put on a weightlifter's belt under my costume. Aldrich said afterward, "There is a way of making it easy on the actor who is doing the carrying, but Crawford wanted Bette to suffer." Davis suffered. Multiple takes were lost to her exhaustion. Davis left the set with back pain that persisted for weeks. I never mentioned the belt publicly. It went undiscussed until Aldrich told the story years later. Baby Jane opened in October 1962. 5 Oscar nominations, $9 million at the box office on a $1 million budget. Davis received her 10th and final Best Actress nomination. I received nothing. The Academy had decided, as Davis had always decided, that what I had done in that film was not acting in the sense that required recognition. I picked up the telephone. I had a plan that required no Academy voters, no campaign, and no nomination. It required only a telephone and the knowledge that several nominated actresses could not attend the ceremony. Bette Davis was the favorite to win Best Actress at the 1963 Academy Awards. The critics said so. The industry said so. Davis had campaigned for the nomination, lobbied, gave interviews, did everything she had always said was beneath an actress of her stature. She needed this win. She said so privately to people who told everyone. I had no nomination. I had a telephone. I called every nominated actress who could not attend the ceremony. Katharine Hepburn was on location. Geraldine Page was on Broadway. Anne Bancroft was on Broadway. I offered to accept the Oscar on behalf of any of them who won. It was a generous offer. It was also a perfect calculation. If Davis won, I would not be on that stage. If anyone else won, I would be on that stage with the trophy while Davis watched from the audience. Anne Bancroft won for The Miracle Worker. Her name was read. I walked onto the stage at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium in magnificent clothes and jewels. No nomination, no film in competition, no claim to that stage except the telephone calls I had made weeks earlier, and accepted an Oscar that was not mine while Bette Davis sat in the audience. Backstage, I was photographed with the trophy alongside the evening's actual winners: Gregory Peck, Patty Duke, Ed Begley. I told the press, I don't want to give it up. I kept Anne Bancroft's Oscar for a full week before personally delivering it to her in New York. Davis said, for the record and repeatedly, "The best time I ever had with Joan was when I pushed her down the stairs in Baby Jane." Davis had expected to win. She had campaigned in the specific way she had always declared beneath her. She lost to Anne Bancroft, and then she sat in the audience at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium and watched me walk across her stage, in her spotlight, with a smile aimed directly at her cameras, holding a trophy that wasn't mine. Davis had the most quoted line of the entire war. I had the image that every newspaper printed the next morning. We both knew which one the audience remembered. Aldrich came to both of us with a proposal. Another picture, another Louisiana mansion, another chance to do what Baby Jane had done, which had grossed $9 million and revived both our careers and proven that the industry was wrong about women our age. Davis said yes immediately. I said yes. And then something happened on that set that nobody talks about when they tell the story of our war, because it disrupts the clean narrative where Davis is the victim and I am the saboteur. Davis invited me. Not in the way I had invited her to Baby Jane. I had gone to her theater, waited for her curtain call, walked backstage with a book and a handwritten note. Davis's invitation for Charlotte was less generous. She had already been on the set for days before I arrived in Louisiana. She had already established her position with Aldrich, with the crew, with the production. When I arrived, Davis was sitting next to the director, criticizing my every move before the camera had turned once. Adele Aldridge, who was on that set, confirmed it. Davis had a mean streak and wouldn't stop antagonizing me. Every choice I made, how I looked, how I moved, what I asked for, Davis commented on from her position next to Aldrich. She had the director's ear, and she used it as a weapon from day one. I lasted 1 week. I checked into a hospital citing health problems. Davis said I was afraid. She said it publicly, and she said it for 25 years. She said, "I wouldn't piss on Joan Crawford if she were on fire." That quote went into the papers alongside photographs of Davis on the set drinking Coca-Cola in front of a Coke machine, a direct reference to my position on the Pepsi board. She had the photograph taken and sent to every entertainment column in the country. Davis drinking Coca-Cola on the set of the film that Crawford had just abandoned. No caption needed. Olivia de Havilland took my role. She and Davis completed the picture. It was not Baby Jane. Davis received no nomination. The film was forgotten. What the history books record is that Crawford withdrew from Charlotte and Davis completed it. What the history books leave out is that Davis spent the entire first week of production making sure I understood that this set was hers, that Aldrich's ear was hers, that the territory had already been claimed before I unpacked my bags. Whether I left because I was ill or because I had calculated that I could not win this particular battle on this particular ground is a question I will leave open. Davis had the ground. I made the decision. And Davis had the Coca-Cola photograph ready within 24 hours of my departure, which suggests that she had anticipated the outcome and prepared her response before it arrived. We never worked together again. We never spoke again. The war moved from sets and ceremonies into the 30 years Davis had left. Interviews, memoirs, the carefully maintained narrative of an artist who had outlasted her rival. I died in 1977. Davis had the stage to herself. What she did not know was that my daughter Christina was already writing. Bette Davis spoke publicly about Mommy Dearest, not to pile on, to defend me. I was not Miss Crawford's biggest fan, Davis said, but wisecracks to the contrary, I did and still do respect her talent. What she did not deserve was that detestable book written by her daughter. My worst enemy, my 40-year opponent, the woman who had spent 4 decades constructing and deploying the most precise insults in Hollywood history against me, defending me, publicly, with her name attached. The statement was reported everywhere. People were genuinely shocked. Davis and Crawford had been at war so long that Davis defending Crawford felt like a violation of the natural order. What Davis almost certainly did not anticipate was what was coming in her direction. In 1985, 8 years after my death, Davis's own daughter, B.D. Hyman, published My Mother's Keeper. Davis was alive. She was 77 years old, recovering from a stroke, but alive and reading. B.D. wrote the book while her mother was still breathing, had written it knowing Davis would read every page, knowing Davis would recognize herself in those pages, knowing Davis would have no recourse except to respond in print to a book timed to sell while its subject was still famous enough to generate coverage. Christina had published Mommy Dearest 14 months after I died. I couldn't respond, couldn't defend myself. B.D. gave Davis no such distance. Davis read the book. Davis disinherited B.D. entirely. Then she responded in her own memoir, This and That. If my memory serves me right, I've been your keeper all these many years. I continue to do so, as my name has made your book about me a success. The woman who had defended me had been answered by her own daughter with the same weapon. Christina destroyed me after I was dead. B.D. destroyed Davis while she was alive, watching, and unable to stop it. Davis got to respond. I did not. But the instrument was identical, and the industry that had spent 40 years turning 2 women against each other sat back and watched both of them be destroyed by the people closest to them, and printed every word of it. Davis died in October 1989 in Paris. She was 81 years old. She had survived me by 12 years and used every one of them to continue the narrative, the interviews, the memoirs, the framing of our war as a story in which she was the artist and I was the opportunist. She also had the last line, the most famous quip of our entire war. You should never say bad things about the dead, only good. Joan Crawford is dead. Good. Whether she said those exact words is disputed. Writer Peter Jones told NPR in 2006, I believe those were her sentiments. I could never find her actually saying it. Davis never confirmed or denied it. The line is too perfect not to claim. She would have claimed it. I would have done the same. Here is what the last word doesn't account for. Baby Jane grossed $9 million on a $1 million budget. My 15% profit percentage made me more money than Davis's flat fee. The film Davis was nominated for, and lost, was a film I found, I brought to Aldridge. I proposed to Davis in her dressing room with a note that said, "Love." Davis had the nomination. I had the deal. Davis had the last line. I had the last walk across that Oscar stage, smiling, with a trophy that wasn't mine, while she watched from the audience. The war was conducted publicly for 40 years because the industry needed it public. Jack Warner cultivated the hostility between us because 2 women at war were more manageable than 2 women allied. Aldrich was told by the studio that our on-set tension would create better on-screen chemistry, that our genuine animosity was an asset to be exploited. We understood we were being used. We conducted the war anyway, because the war was also real, and the wounds were also real, and neither of us was capable of letting the other have the last word without answering. The work survived. Mildred Pierce, All About Eve, Baby Jane. Films in the National Film Registry, studied in universities, watched by people who weren't born when we made them. That is what we actually built, not the war. Not the quips, not 40 years of perfectly aimed insults. The work, which is still there. Davis got the last line. I found the film that saved both our careers. We were both right about each other and both wrong about what being right meant. And the audience, which watched every round of the war, bought every newspaper that covered it, tuned into every interview where Davis sharpened another knife. Never had to choose sides. They had us both. That was always the point. We just didn't know it until it was too late to do anything about it. So now you have what the gossip columns condensed into punchlines. The divorce announcement that buried Davis's premiere before she knew I existed. The lipstick on Francho Tone's face every day at lunch. The solarium. The lovely frock. The silk negligee and the pre-positioned photographers. The weightlifter's belt under the costume. The telephone calls to every nominated actress. The walk across that stage at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. No nomination, magnificent clothes, an Oscar that belonged to someone else, a smile aimed directly at where Davis was sitting. The Coca-Cola photograph. Davis defending me after I died. BD's book while Davis was alive to read every page. Davis disinheriting her own daughter. The last line that may or may not have been said. What Davis and I had was real. The hostility was genuine. The competition was genuine. The wounds we inflicted were genuine. What was not genuine was the idea that we were each other's primary problem. The industry that decided women over 50 were box office poison was the primary problem. The studio system that positioned us as rivals rather than colleagues was the primary problem. Jack Warner, who cultivated our hostility because divided women were easier to control than allied ones, was the primary problem. Davis and I aimed at each other because that was the target the industry provided, and we were both precise enough to hit it every time. Davis had the last word. I had the last image. The audience had 40 years of the best show Hollywood never officially produced. Share this. And the next time someone tells you a feud between 2 powerful women is just vanity and spite, ask who was selling tickets to the war. It was never the women.